The champion's mindset, I think a lot of people hear the word champion, they think of a famous sports star. You might think of, in the US, you might think of Michael Jordan or LeBron James going and dunking on somebody. But we think of it differently. We think of it as, well, when you get on the field, put everything you have into it. Put every ounce of energy you have on the field. Leave nothing on the field. And two, when you get knocked down, because if you're an entrepreneur, inevitably you will be. When you see hard times and you get knocked down, get back up. And if you keep putting everything you got into it and you keep getting back up when you get knocked down, it's almost impossible to fail.
Fear is the disease. Hustle is the antidote. So in my day, I already sound like an old school dude. In my day, it was just tough, man. You start a company in 2001, good luck, right? You can't count on funding. You can't count on sales. You can't count on anything but just crazy hustle and just grit your teeth, claw your way to success. There was just no easy way to do it.
One of the things that really hurt Apple was after I left, John Sculley got a very serious disease. And that disease, I've seen other people get it too. It's the disease of thinking that a really great idea is 90% of the work. And that if you just tell all these other people, here's this great idea, then of course they can go off and make it happen. The problem with that is that there's just a tremendous amount of craftsmanship in between a great idea and a great product. And as you evolve that great idea, it changes and grows. It never comes out like it starts, because you learn a lot more as you get into the subtleties of it. And you also find there's tremendous trade-offs that you have to make. I mean, there are just certain things you can't make electrons do. There are certain things you can't make plastic do or glass do. And as you get into, or factories do, or robots do. And as you get into all these things, designing a product is keeping 5,000 things in your brain, these concepts, and fitting them all together in kind of continuing to push to fit them together in new and different ways to get what you want. And every day you discover something new that is a new problem or a new opportunity to fit these things together a little differently. And it's that process that is the magic.
About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning, and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas. I didn't even know what a pancreas was. The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable, and that I should expect to live no longer than 3 to 6 months. My doctor advised me to go home and get my affairs in order, which is doctor's code for prepare to die. It means to try and tell your kids everything. You thought you'd have the next 10 years to tell them in just a few months. It means to make sure everything is buttoned up so that it will be as easy as possible for your family. It means to say your goodbyes. I lived with that diagnosis all day. Later that evening, I had a biopsy where they stuck an endoscope down my throat, through my stomach and into my intestines, put a needle into my pancreas and got a few cells from the tumor. I was sedated, but my wife, who was there, told me that when they viewed the cells under a microscope, the doctors started crying, because it turned out to be a very rare form of pancreatic cancer that is curable with surgery. I had the surgery, and thankfully, I'm fine now. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become.
The doers are the major thinkers. The people that really create the things that change this industry are both the thinker-doer in one person. And if we really go back and we examine, did Leonardo have a guy off to the side that was thinking 5 years out in the future what he would paint or the technology he would use to paint it? Of course not. Leonardo was the artist, but he also mixed all his own paints. He also was a fairly good chemist, knew about pigments, knew about human anatomy, and combining all of those skills together, the art and the science, the thinking and the doing, was what resulted in the exceptional result. And there is no difference in our industry. The people that have really made the contributions have been the thinkers and the doers. And when you a lot of people, of course, it's very easy to take credit for the thinking. The doing is more concrete, but it's very easy for somebody to say, oh, I thought of this 3 years ago. But usually when you dig a little deeper, you find that the people that really did it were also the people that really worked through the hard intellectual problems as well. And we went through that stage in Apple where we went out and we thought, oh, we're going to be a big company, let's hire professional management. We went out and hired a bunch of professional management. It didn't work at all. Most of them were bozos. They knew how to manage, but they didn't know how to do anything. And so if you're a great person, why do you want to work for somebody that you can't learn anything from? And you know what's interesting? You know who the best managers are? They're the great individual contributors who never ever want to be a manager, but decide they have to be a manager because no one else is going to be able to do as good a job as them. The greatest people are self-managing. They don't need to be managed. Once they know what to do, they'll go figure out how to do it. They don't need to be managed at all. What they need is a common vision, and that's what leadership is. What leadership is having a vision, being able to articulate that so the people around you can understand it, and getting a consensus on a common vision. We wanted people that were insanely great at what they did, but we're not necessarily those seasoned professionals, but who had at the tips of their fingers and in their passion the latest understanding of where technology was and what we could do with that technology, and who wanted to bring that to lots of people. So the neatest thing that happens is when you get a core group of 10 great people, it becomes self-policing as to who they let into that group.
This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist?
And I said to him, what makes the Marines so great? And he looked at me and said, officers eat last. And it sort of struck me that if you compare that to the business world and the entrepreneurial world, entrepreneurs are always told, pay yourself first, look after yourself first. And yet, I'm being told by this Marine general that it's the complete opposite. And there's a symbolic gesture, but more importantly, there's an importance to it. There's a photograph I saw, in these Kenya shootings that happened not so long ago. We had the amazing experience that a photographer happened to be in the building. Usually we see the aftermath, and here we now have photographs of the actual shooting going on. And there's one photograph that was in the New York Times that both haunted me and inspired me to this day. It haunted me and inspires me, I should say. And it's the photograph of a mother, in the sound of gunshots, lays herself on top of her child. And you see this picture of a mother lying on top of her child, and you realize that's what it is. That's what leadership is. That when there is danger, it's not protecting myself, but it's rather willing to put myself in harm's way to protect another. That's what eating last means. It means that I will give the very essence of life, food and water. I will give it to the person I love first so that they may live, even if it means I eat less. And that's what officers eat last means. It is symbolic, but it is also very real.
At my graduation, my class cheered for the PhD students and then booed the business school. Business school seemed like such a sellout. 18 months later, I applied to business school. It wasn't that I was wrong about what I would do decades after graduating. I had it wrong a year and a half later. And even if I could have predicted I would one day work in the private sector, I never could have predicted Facebook because there was no internet. And Mark Zuckerberg was in elementary school, already wearing his hoodie. Not locking into a path too early gave me an opportunity to go into a new and life-changing field. There is no straight path from your seat today to where you are going. Don't try to draw that line. You will not just get it wrong, you will miss big opportunities. And I mean big, like the internet. Careers are not ladders. Those days are long gone, but jungle gyms. Don't just move up and down. Don't just look up. Look backwards, sideways, around corners. Your career and your life will have starts and stops and zigs and dags. Don't stress out about the white space, the path you can't draw, because therein lies both the surprises and the opportunities.
I say, who got you here won't get you there, right? Not just what, but who. And he said that basically what they found is that at ones and threes, you need a completely different group of people, and they can't take you past more than 2 sets of 1 and 3. So if you're at 1 million, the people that got you to 1 million, maybe they can take you to 3, but it's probably not 10. People that got you to 10 are probably not going to take you to 30 and then 100, and so on and so forth. And it's so true. And entrepreneurs have a tendency to hold on to the people. You know, it's like, I feel loyal, I'd be disloyal if these are the guys. But you're doing them a disservice because you're promoting them into something that they're not competent to do. They're going to be frustrated. They will ultimately fail, and fail in kind of a bad and discouraging way. Whereas if you can say, look, it's just like you and I, we're not startup people. But the startup people aren't the growth people usually, right? So it's just different sets of skills. And if you can recognize that and say, typically that's a demarcation at 1s and 3s and, in the growth pattern, then you're only going to invest your money in the people that can get you to those places. That's kind of how I look at it.
In almost all cases that I'm familiar with and have thought hard about, you've had a founder who was deeply, deeply inculcated in the domain of technology that they were taking on. Now, what's interesting about that is you could say, no, wait, how is that possible? Because there's so many young founders. When you look at young founders, they're generally coming out of very nascent emerging fields of technology, where simply being present and accounted for and engaged in the community for a period of even months is enough time to make them very, very deeply inculcated. I mean, you look at Mark Andreessen and Netscape. Mark had been doing visual web browsers when Netscape had been founded for a year and a half, but he'd created the first one, and in Mosaic when he was an undergrad, and the commercial internet was pre-nascent in 1994 when Netscape was founded. So there's somebody who's very, very deep in their domain. Mark Zuckerberg also, social networking, very deep in his domain, even though it was nascent at the time.
The most common one is a fast cycle of a learning clock of here's what we're learning, here's what we understood, here's what we thought before, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, here's what we're doing. And that cycle gone all the way up to the board. So a classic mistake that's made, the inverse of that, is everything's fine. And you're like, no. Startups are you throw yourself off a cliff and you assemble an airplane on the way down. You're by default, when you start, you're dead. Not everything's fine. It's here's what we're learning, here's what we're doing, here's what we're learning, here's what we're doing. And the speed of that cycle is super important. So for example, one of the things that we use as a startup term within Silicon Valley is this thing, OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, act, which is fighter pilot terminology. And the faster, in fighter pilots, the faster OODA loop wins. That pilot survives, the other one dies. Part of what we talk about in Silicon Valley is what's the speed of your OODA loop. One of the classic questions is balance. And I actually think founders have no balance. One of the funniest conversations I ever had was with a governor of Colorado who was like, we're going to attract really great entrepreneurs here because we have this balanced lifestyle. Like literally, if I ever hear a founder talking about, oh, this is how I have a balanced life and so forth, they're not committed to winning, right? And so the only really great founders are, I am going to literally pour everything into doing this. Now, it only may be for a couple years. I may do this for a while, then go do all things. But while I'm doing this, I am unbalanced at this thing. It's not to say you don't take breaks, not to say that you don't, go on dates or whatever else, but you're super focused on this because it's really hard and there's lots of ways to die. And that's the reason why the jumping off the cliff metaphor is one of the ones that I classically use.
I think that everyone assumes that there's this power law in the world that you are a passive participant in. You're either going to catch one of the power law winners or you're going to lose it. Therefore, you've got to portfolio your way to a power law to catch a power law. I don't give a shit about that because I think my job in life is to make the power law and to make that outcome. And I feel like that has made a huge impact on how I think about life. And it's every time I've tried to act on it, it's actually paid back significantly. So focus is the biggest piece of advice I've gotten that I think matters.
So the version of that I tell founders all the time is always be all in on your best idea. Because founders sometimes have a whole bunch of different ideas. Sometimes they're doing multiple startups. Sometimes they're thinking about pivoting, but they're still hanging on to the old idea. And I always give them permission to pivot. I'm like, don't worry about what you said you're going to do, whatever, 2 quarters ago when you raised this money. Whatever you think the best idea is right now, like, let's go all in on that. Do not hedge your bets. I think that's just really important for founders. And it goes back to what you're saying. It's just so hard to execute any idea that you can't be hedged as a founder.
7 Samurai. Yeah. Akira Kurosawa did such an amazing job representing this ethos, I think. Like, you strike and you strike perfectly, and you strike with full force and with all your energy and everything you have, your whole character, everything, and you can accomplish incredible things.
If I were starting an industry right now and I was new and I was young, there are 3 major things I would keep in mind. Number 1 is I would take myself more serious than anybody expects to take me. Number 2, I would understand exactly everything I need to do so I'm better than everybody else. And number 3, I will go out of my way to let know everybody that I'm working with that I'm that guy.
I know a lot of people that have made it great and done great things in business at a young age. Young doesn't mean that you can waste time and tomorrow is promised.
I think it's harder for a young person to succeed in business because oftentimes they don't have a mentor. And for me, I'm just going to tell you, I was lucky to find a mentor early on in life that taught me about how to have fun and be a businessman, but also live the right way.
To set a great example for future generations, there's a couple things that I've always heard that have benefited me, that I've made part of my life is, number 1, you got to read the right books. You got to put the right things in your mind. They say out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Whatever's abundant in you is what you let go. Second thing is being around the right people. I find too many of my friends are around the wrong people. I constantly want to put myself around people that are living the kind of life that I'd want to live and exemplify. And I look for those people and I seek them out. And when I find one, I try to make sure that I'm around them because they challenge me. And they don't always tell you the things that you want to hear, but they'll tell you the things that you have to hear in order to take your life to another level.
To always value substance over status, substance over prestige. And if I was giving my younger self advice on what to do or how to think about one's life, I probably would still go to Stanford, might still go to law school, but I'd ask a lot more questions why I was doing these things. I think if I was honest about it, too much of it was driven by prestige and status and not quite enough about really the substance of trying to learn things. And I had sort of this, I sort of just think of it as this sort of crazy rolling quarter life crisis, and sort of culminated in this big New York law firm where from the outside everybody wanted to get in, from the inside everybody wanted to get out. I lasted 7 months and 3 days, and when I left, one of the people down the hall said, "It's so reassuring to see you leave, Peter. I had no idea it was possible to escape from Alcatraz." And all you had to do was go through the front door. But people's identities get so wrapped up in the things they compete for that it was inconceivable for people to actually do that. And then the question was, how had I ended up there? Why had I not thought about that more? And I think it was that I had taken too many of these shortcuts of valuing what was prestigious, what was conventional, over what I really wanted to do. So I think always substance over status.
We were hiring for a CEO of AppSumo, and he didn't just send a resume, he made a video. And this is like, 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's when that was like a really forward-thinking thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think when people want something in life, when they get rejected or they're not getting what they want, it's a test of if they really want it. Like, rejection is a test if you really want something. And so most people get rejected once and give up. And the reality is like, how much are you coming back and coming back and coming back when it's not working out right away? And that's a hard part of what courage is. Courage is being afraid and going after it. And Eamon applied for something, we rejected him. And then he applied again for this thing, and we're like, all right, we'll give you a shot.
For a CEO role?
It wasn't a CEO right away, it was a general manager role.
Okay, got it.
And his only directive was, don't fuck this up. Like, your job is to make $120,000 a month. He knows this number. You call him right now and say, I had to get $120,000 a month because we wanted to start a new business. And for 2 years, it was just making that number for him. And so, yeah, being with Eamon, and I think for others out there, a lot of business owners are like, I'd love to have a CEO. And I think a few things of it. One, it took a year to find him, and it took about 2 years to train him. So it takes a long time to actually find someone who could be a CEO. And the second part that's interesting, fast forwarding today, I like being a CEO. Mm-hmm. It's great. I'm like, my job is to like set the vision, put parameters, what's our values and culture, and then make sure the player's in the right place. This is such a cool job.
Yeah.
Specialization is for insects, right? So everyone should just be able to do everything. And so I don't believe in this model anymore of trying to focus your life down on one thing. You've got one life, just do everything you're going to do. The analogy around mountain climbing, like if you find a mountain and you start climbing, you spend your whole life climbing it, and you get, say, 2/3 of the way, and then you see the peak is like way up there, but you're 2/3 of the way up, you're still really high up. But now to go the rest of the way, you're going to have to go back down to the bottom and look for another path. Nobody wants to do that. People don't want to start over.
Yeah.
And it's the nature of later in life that you just don't have the time. So it's very painful to go back down and look for a new path, but that may be the best thing to do. And that's why when you look at the greatest artists and creators, they have this ability to start over that nobody else does. Like Elon will, be called an idiot and start over doing something brand new that he supposedly is not qualified for. Or when Madonna or Paul Simon or U2 come out with a new album, their existing fans usually hate it because they've adopted a completely new style that they've learned somewhere else. And a lot of times they'll just miss completely. So you have to be willing to be a fool and kind of have that beginner's mind and go back to the beginning to start over. And if you're not doing that, you're just getting older. If you're looking to improve yourself, if you're looking to figure out the truth, you're probably much better off as an individual following your own natural curiosity. And that's really what it boils down to, is curiosity and sort of a commitment to learning the correct answer. And I think if you have that, then you can fulfill almost any desire. All the tools are there. The means of learning are abundance. It's a desire to learn that's scarce. And that's true even within me. Most of the time I'm exhausted. I don't want to learn. I just want to relax or do the things that I'm already good at. But at the same time, if I look back on my life, almost everything great that I've managed to pull off has come from following my own natural intellectual obsessions. So I think if you can get obsessed over something, and if you can dive into it, sort of just let yourself go and just learn everything about it with no motivation other than just you want to know the answer. I think that is the kind of basis for all of the so-called self-improvement out there. You're following your obsession on the network state. There are people out there following their obsession on AI, on crypto, and people are following their obsession on history, Roman history, whatever it is. But if you kind of get obsessed with something, you can figure it out to a detail that other people don't. You can satisfy yourself. Self-improvement really just comes from letting you be yourself, follow the things that you really want to follow, figuring out the things that you want to figure out, not worrying about what other people want or other people think, and then you kind of find yourself in the same place at the end, no matter which route you take. We like to think that we like to view the world as linear, which is I'm going to put in 8 hours of work, I'm going to get back 8 hours of output, right?
Mhm.
Doesn't work that way. The guy running the corner grocery store is working just as hard or harder than you and me. How much output is he getting? What you do, who you do it with, how you do it, way more important than how hard you work, right? Outputs are non-linear based on the quality of the work that you put in. The right way to work is like a lion. You and I are not like cows. We're not meant to graze all day, right? We're meant to hunt like lions. We're closer to carnivores in our omnivorous development than we are to herbivores.
Don't tell vegans that.
Yeah, sorry. Look, I wish all that stuff worked. I don't want to eat meat. Future generation will look back at us as worse than slavers, because of the Holocaust we're committing with the animals. But they'll have artificial meats that taste and are healthier, is better than the real thing. So, allegedly. But so, as a modern knowledge worker athlete, as an intellectual athlete, you want to function like an athlete, which means you train hard, then you sprint, then you rest, then you reassess, you get your feedback loop, then you train some more, then you sprint again, then you rest, then you reassess. This idea that you're going to have linear output just by cranking every day at the same amount of time, that's machines. Machines should be working 9 to 5. Humans are not meant to work 9 to 5. It's because I believe everybody can be wealthy. Everybody. It's not a zero-sum game. It is a positive-sum game.
They believe that capitalism has screwed people over and eliminated the middle class. And
there are absolutely problems with capitalism. I think monopolies are a problem. I think that crony capitalism is a problem with the government, kind of gets in bed with them and sort of forces things. I think the bankers have really, raped society, and the rest of us are suffering for it. Yeah, they've essentially taken huge risks where they privatize the gains and they socialize the losses. So when it fails, they basically get bailed out and bankrupt everybody else. So capitalism has gotten a really bad name. Let's talk about it as free exchange, free markets. Free markets and free exchange are intrinsic to humans. From when the first person started a fire and somebody came along with a deer and said, hey, if I cook my deer on your fire, I'll share some of it with you, right? So specialization of labor, we trade, that's built into the human species. Basic math comes from accounting, keeping track of debts and credits and so on. We need to be able to engage in free trade. The correct criticism of capitalism is when it does not provide equal opportunity. And so we should always strive to provide equal opportunity. But people confuse that with equal outcome. When you have equal outcome, that can only be enforced through violence, because different people, free people, make different choices. And when they make different choices, they have different outcomes. And if you don't let them suffer the consequences of bad choices or reap the rewards from good choices.
Try to focus on daily and weekly problems as opposed to monthly or yearly problems. It's a lot easier to do something like Uber. The typical person in America has to figure out how to get somewhere 3 times a day. It's a lot harder to do a car sales website. The typical person in America only buys a car once every 7 years. So try to focus on daily and weekly problems. It tends to be a lot more successful.
If you just look historically at many of the important technology companies in the last 50 years, 100 years, many of them are run by their founders for decades. And a lot of it has to do with disruption. There's this cliche of founders that a lot of people believe, or used to believe, which is that founders are too stubborn and founders get too locked into their original idea and they can't adapt as times change. We've actually found the opposite to be true. We've found that when a company is going to get disrupted, the person, in many cases, with the best odds of countering the disruption is the founder. And I think there's a couple different reasons for that. I think one is the founder remembers when the business was nothing. The founder remembers what it was like when there was like nobody else in the office with you and when you carried out your own trash can. Like the founder remembers this thing used to be zero. And so the founders have a vision kind of in their heads that kind of haunts them that says this thing used to be zero, now it's something. It could be zero again. And so when an existential threat like somebody coming in with a disruptive product occurs, the founder, we often find, is emotionally able to wrap their head around it and then able to actually figure out what to do about it, because they know that if they don't, they're going to be in real trouble. The other thing we find with the founder mentality is that the founder can carry enormous moral weight inside the company to then be able to make the changes that are required. When Steve Jobs, goes into Apple and says times are changing and we need to do X, and X is heresy compared to everything Apple had done up until that point. As Steve Jobs, a founder is going to be able to convince the company that they have to do that, whereas a professional CEO shows up and says that, and everybody's kind of like, ooh. Well, so the general criteria for a successful high-tech startup, in my view, you see different sort of rules of thumb from different people, but the 3 big things you always come back to are, is there a big market? And by the way, that comes in 2 parts. Is there a big existing market that you think you can go after and sort of displace incumbents, or do you believe there will be a new market that'll be big? So big market. Is there a fundamental technology or economic change that causes you to basically justify having a new company? And that's really important. And the way I always think about that is there a 10x change happening in the technology landscape? Is something 10x faster or 10x cheaper or 10x better? And if it's not 10x, we view as both VCs and entrepreneurs, we really have to ask ourselves, like, is it really worth doing? Because it's really hard. It's really hard to start new companies. Taking my macro theory, new companies generally shouldn't exist. Existing companies are usually pretty good at what they do. And so for a new company to exist, it not only has to come in and go into business and bring a product to market, but it has to bring a product to market that's so much better than what already exists that it punches through the sort of status quo. Most customers in most markets are pretty happy buying from the current suppliers, and so there has to be a real kind of edge on the thing, and we look for that in either a technology change, usually a technology change or an economic change. And then the third is team. Is the team outstanding? And if you think about this as an entrepreneur, it becomes a question of the founding team. Some companies are solo founders and they can work, but generally, most of us, like myself, who are human beings, or mortal, you want to have a founding team of complementary skill sets.
I started taking classes at UC Berkeley. I took several classes, but the only one I can remember was a sailing class taught at Berkeley Marina. When my class was over, I wanted to buy a sailboat. My wife said this was the single stupidest idea she had ever heard in her entire life. She accused me of being irresponsible, and she told me I lacked ambition. She kicked me out, and then she divorced me. My family was still mad at me for not going to medical school, and now my wife was divorcing me because I lacked ambition. It looked like a reoccurrence of the same old problem. Once again, I was unable to live up to the expectations of others. I was not disappointed in myself for failing to be, the person they thought I should be. Their dreams and my dreams were different. I would never confuse the two of them again. I bought the sailboat and lived on board, just me and my cat in Berkeley Marina. I searched and I searched, but I just could not find a software engineering job that I loved as much as I loved sailing. So I tried to create one. That way I could completely control my work environment. My goal was to create the perfect job for me, a job I truly loved. I never expected the company to grow beyond 50 people. So maybe I really did lack ambition or vision back then. I don't know. It was a long time ago, and I was very young.
I'd had a short and really quite catastrophic marriage, and I'm left with this baby, and I've got to get this baby back to Britain, and I've got to rebuild us a life. And adrenaline kept me going through that, and it was only when I came to rest that it hit me what a complete mess I had made of my life. And that hit me quite hard.
We were as skint as you can be without being homeless. In other words, we were existing entirely on benefits. And at that point, I was definitely clinically depressed.
I stopped pretending to myself that I was anything other than what I was, and began to direct all my energy into finishing the only work that mattered to me. Had I really succeeded at anything else, I might never have found the determination to succeed in the one arena where I believed I truly belonged. I was set free because my greatest fear had been realized, and I was still alive, and I still had a daughter whom I adored, and I had an old typewriter and a big idea. And so rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. You might never fail on the scale I did. Some failure in life is inevitable. It is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default.
Let go of this idea that you have to find this one great thing that is my passion, my great passion, with your shirt torn open and your heaving pec muscles. It's embarrassing. Just be willing to do your work as hard as you can with the ability you have. We don't need the heavy breathing and the outstretched arm from your passion. It makes coworkers uncomfortable in the cubicle next to you. Find fascination. Fascination is way better than passion. It's not so sweaty. I will give you my 3 real keys to life, no jokes in this part. Okay, they are: number 1, bust your ass. Number 2, pay attention. Number 3, fall in love. Number 1, you obviously already know. Whatever you're doing, I don't care if it's your job, your hobby, a relationship, getting a reservation at M Sushi, make an effort. Just pure, stupid, no real idea what I'm doing here effort. Effort always yields a positive value, even if the outcome of the effort is absolute failure of the desired result. This is a rule of life. Just swing the bat and pray is not a bad approach to a lot of things. Number 2.
We know from our past experiences that big things start small. The biggest oak starts from an acorn, and you've got to recognize, if you want to do anything new, you've got to be willing to let that acorn grow into a little sapling and then finally into a small tree, and maybe one day it'll be a big business on its own.
And in fact, that's one of the mottos for one of your initiatives, and forgive my pronunciation of the Latin, but Gradatim Ferociously. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means step by step ferociously, and it's the motto for Blue Origin. Basically, you can't skip steps. You have to put one foot in front of the other. Things take time. There are no shortcuts, but you want to do those steps with passion and ferocity.
It's really easy for a talented young person to take pride in their gifts. They can say, I'm really athletic, or I'm really smart, or I'm really good at math. And that's fine. You should celebrate your gifts. You should be happy, but you can't be proud of them because they're gifts after all. They were given to you. What you can be proud of is your choices. How did you decide to use your gifts? Did you study hard? Did you work hard? Did you practice? The people who really excel combine gifts and hard work. And the hard work part is a choice. You get to decide that. And that is something, when you're looking back on your life, you'll be very proud of.
I really liked my job, and I told my boss I was going to go do this thing, start an internet bookstore. He said, I think this is a good idea, but it would be an even better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job. And that sort of made some logical sense to me, and he convinced me to think about it for a couple of days, so I went away. And I was really trying to get my head around how to think about this. And I think, for me, the right way to make that kind of very personal decision, because those decisions are personal, they're not like data-driven business decisions. They are, what does your heart say? And for me, the best way to think about it was to project myself forward to age 80 and say, look, when I'm 80 years old, I want to have minimized the number of regrets that I have. I don't want to be 80 years old in a quiet moment of reflection, thinking back over my life and cataloging a bunch of major regrets. And I think our biggest regrets turn out to be acts of omission. It's paths not taken, and they haunt us. We wonder, what would have happened? I loved that person, and I never told him. And then they married somebody else. And so that's the frame of mind that I put myself in. And once I did that, once I thought about it that way, it was immediately obvious to me. I knew that when I'm 80, I would never regret trying this thing that I was super excited about and failing. If it failed, fine. I would be very proud of the fact when I'm 80 that I tried.
I think probably our most important piece of intellectual property is our brand name. And I think people, and I think this is very important for anybody who's going to start a company or market an invention to understand, is that brands for companies are like reputations for people. And reputations are hard-earned and easily lost. So the most important intellectual property that a company can have is, for us, it's Amazon. It's that name, but what it stands for. And we've worked very hard to earn trust. You can't ask for trust. You just have to do it the hard way, one step at a time. You make a promise and then fulfill the promise. You say, we'll deliver this to you, tomorrow, and then you actually deliver it tomorrow. And if you do that over and over again, then ultimately you can instill your company's name with a reputation. And that's, I think, sometimes people talk about brands in this very amorphous way, but for me, I like to think of it as a person, and what is the reputation that that person has, and how have they earned that reputation?
So if you look at Calm, Robinhood, Uber, Tesla, Amazon, these products are transcendent, they're well constructed, there's craftsmanship to them, they're great products.
So you're saying not fundamentally like the idea, but the execution of the actual craftsmanship
Exactly.
of the construction.
The actual product is amazing. Then there's customers. Customer, if they are in fact delighted by that product, that's the magic. Because you need a team to build the product, and then you need customers to use the product. And really those three vectors are undeniable. Now, you could have great teams that build a bad product, doesn't happen too often, or you could have customers who don't like the product, but generally speaking, a great team will build a great product or a good product and iterate, and then eventually delight customers. And so most people say the team is the most important, but there's a lot of smart people out there. And let's assume that you can raise money for your idea, or you have money, or you can just convince people to do it for free. If you make a great product and it connects with users, that's the match. And you can tell the delighted customer by just the amount of time they use it. That's called engagement. Mm-hmm. It's just a fancy word for how much they use it. And Snapchat, when that was going around and they were trying to raise money, they had a fraction of the number of users. But the top maybe third were opening the app every hour.
So how do you build a brand from scratch? This is another question that they were asking. Basically, yep. How do you position yourself as a brand in a world that is constantly changing by the minute? And how do you start from scratch and avoid being mocked by the community because everybody's mocking you for starting something new or daring?
So if you're worried about mockery, you're very unlikely to succeed. It's just too difficult. There's too many opinions and too much judgment, and there's no hiding when you're building a brand online. So that's just a mental, insecure, secure, confidence, lack of confidence, mother, father, culture thing that you're gonna have to work through. That's more psychologist, that's more therapist, that's more macro thinking than business. On the business front, the good news is every single person started with zero. There's not a person that started with a community. So, it comes down to content. It's just a very boring answer, but the quality of your content, not the production quality, the quality of your words, your thoughts, your output, are the variable of success. The end. And so I think people need to really give that a thought. Are you bringing value to people, or are you putting out content hoping they buy your thing? And I think that spirit matters in building a brand. Talk about what you know and bring the most value to the other person.
I'm no longer a Google employee. In the spirit of full disclosure, Google decided that work-life balance and going home early and working from home was more important than winning. And the reason startups work is because the people work like hell. And I'm sorry to be so blunt. There's a long history of companies winning in a genuinely creative way and really dominating a space and not making this the next transition. It's very well documented. And I think that the truth is, founders are special, the founders need to be in charge, the founders are difficult to work with, they push people hard. As much as we can dislike Elon's personal behavior, look at what he gets out of people. I had dinner with him. He was flying that night at 10 p.m. to have a meeting at midnight with X.AI. Think about it. I was in Taiwan, different country, different culture. This is TSMC, who I'm very impressed with. And they have a rule that the starting PhDs, good physicists, work in the factory on the basement floor. Now, can you imagine getting American physicists to do that? The PhDs, highly unlikely. Different work ethic. And the problem here, the reason I'm being so harsh about work is that these are systems which have network effects. So time matters a lot. And in most businesses, time doesn't matter that much, right? You have lots of time,
Necessarily think that you have to have the home run and the huge Apple computer on your first start. I spent a long time in my life with skills just building little devices for fun. For fun is one of the key things, because that drives you to think and think and think and make it better and better and better than you ever would if you're doing it for a company. Build things at first for yourself that you would want.
For somebody aspiring to take things to the next level or to even surpass their wildest dreams, there's always going to have to be an element of luck, but I think more important is putting yourself in a business that can be ubiquitous, that really doesn't have limits. Because otherwise, there's always going to be a grind to it. But if the business, if it can't be something that you can visualize every business using or every consumer using, it's going to be tough to scale to be big enough or to have the perceived value.
You want an idea about what you can say. I know it sounds like a bad idea, but here's specifically why it's actually a great one. You want to sound crazy, but you want to actually be right.
Because when you're trying to differentiate, when you're trying to do something different, there's going to be that gut moment, that gut sense. Is this right? Is this not right? If you're not having doubt, you're not pushing the boundaries far enough.
So I'm 17 now. Across all my businesses, we're doing around $1 million a month in revenue. We thought of the idea for Creo. Creo was basically the solution to our problem with making short form videos, where it took us a long time to edit these videos. So that's when we decided late 2023 to start building this software company out.
You as a human, when you have an idea, to then taking action, to then just blindly launching it, is like the time between those feels like minutes. It's like you have an idea, then you're like, that works. 2 minutes later, you are literally building it, and then 2 minutes later, you launch it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's helped me with pretty much any business I've started, whether it's failed or succeeded, is just my time between idea to execution. It's been very low. I'll always act on an idea I have, because worst case it doesn't work and best case it does.
Like if I have to boil down, that's like the only difference between people who make a lot of money and don't, is like you have the courage to, you do it quickly, like there's a sense of urgency, and then you have the courage to actually like try, where most people are like, they just like put it off to the next day, or like they want it to be perfect. So you're just all about action. And so with the product itself, you said it will do scripts, it'll do captions, but doesn't it also like generate, like if you wanted to, like if you got a script, you have a story, it will literally generate like images, like
Yeah,
you could
so
literally make an entire faceless video.
We have like generative AI features on Creo as well that do that, and we've been optimizing those to be really insane. But also we adapt the tool based on what the industry is doing, and so there's a lot of niches in the industry that are just stronger than others, and so we adapt our tool to those.
I mean, a lot of my life, quite honestly, is just copying things that I see. There's not a lot of original thought here. It truly is not. I mean, we can all pretend we're all fucking geniuses. Honestly, be good copiers. You know what I'm saying? Be around high-functioning, high-quality people and just copy the shit that they do. Observe the shit that's, you know, kind of crappy, and then don't do that stuff. It's not a fucking complicated formula.
There's a deep connection between money as an instrument of change and what you're doing now at Social Capital.
Look, here's the thing. There's about 150 people that run the world. Anybody who wants to go into politics, they're all fucking puppets, okay? There are 150, and they're all men, that run the world, period, full stop. They control most of the important assets. They control the money flows. And these are not the tech entrepreneurs. Now, they are going to get rolled over the next 5 to 10 years by the people that are really underneath pulling the strings. And when you get behind the curtain and see how that world works, what you realize is it is unfairly set up for them and their progeny. Now, I'm not going to say that that's something that we can rip apart, but first order of business is I want to break through and be at that table. And the way that I do that is by proving that I can do what they do as well as they do it, and then do it better than how they do it. Because at the end of the day, they are commercial fucking animals.
If you're pre-product market fit, the best advice that I have from that period is action produces information. So just like keep doing stuff. Paul Graham had this great line like that. I think that's his line. And he was like, startups are like sharks. If they stop swimming, they die. You know, so even if you're like not sure what to do, like just do anything, because when you do it, it'll produce some information. Like people liked it, they didn't. This was very true for me. There was times where I just did something, instead of debating it endlessly, and like just try it, you know, like, all right, so we shipped it, and like there was a couple times where like the minute I shipped it, I was like, I know we built this wrong, but now I have an idea of what to do next. And it wasn't, I only would have had that idea if we had actually gone through the exercise of going to build it. It's like my other favorite analogy for this is that you're like at the base of a mountain that's shrouded in fog, and you're looking up at the mountain and you're trying to think like, okay, how do I get up there? But you can only see like 3 or 4 steps ahead because the fog is so thick. So you have to just take steps into the unknown. And when you take 3 steps, another 3 steps will be revealed ahead of you. And sometimes you'll end up on some local maximum. You'll have to retrace your steps or whatever, or come up to a cliff, you know. But most people in life don't take the steps into the fog, into the unknown, because it's scary. Or they're like, I don't know, what if I fail? Or like, I don't know how that's going to work, or I might run out of money, or I won't be able to get a job after.
There comes a time, I've seen this happen to various people in their life. It's something triggers it. Sometimes it's like, it's an age thing. They're like turning a certain age where they always thought they would have more done by then, or they, you know, maybe someone in their family passes away and they're like, oh my God, like time is finite, it's precious. And something happens where they're like, I'm not going to fuck around anymore. Like, I'm going to get this done, no matter the cost. And they just start really buckling down. They find this source of energy. And so, you know, find whatever that is for you, like the listener out there, and then go hard at it. You know, finish your book, like launch your thing, whatever it is, the app, the startup. Just start doing stuff. Like, and even if you don't even know what to do, just do anything, because you know action will produce information. You just reminded me. There was a precursor to Coinbase, which was this app that I built with my friend, which we were trying to figure out how Bitcoin worked, and we built that. And the minute we shipped it, I was like, it's built wrong. And I knew the architecture was wrong, and then I knew what to do next. And so oftentimes you don't even know what to do, just do anything, and it'll help you get to the right thing.
Action leads to information.
Yeah, action produces information.
Action, never heard that before.
I stole that from Paul Graham, I think, who started Y Combinator.
Yeah,
it's so true.
Actually, my father, who's here, he's dad over there in the corner, he told me it was a really dumb idea to start an investment fund right out of business school. And he recommended that I go work for Michael Steinhardt or George Soros or one of the other famous investors at the time, but I figured that I knew enough. This is the perils of youth. But the answer is I was an entrepreneur, and I felt that I wanted to approach investing my own way as opposed to learn from someone else. And it's one of the few things you can really learn on your own. You can learn investing by reading books, by reading annual reports, by having you can have a portfolio and invest $100, and you can learn the business.
Do you ever hear a person complaining that constantly is chasing greatness?
No, not at all. They don't have time for it.
Yeah, they don't have time for it. And their perspective is totally different. When they wake up, they're not looking for easy. They're looking for hard. What they do is they're efficient. They don't run around and be busy all day long. A lot of people that are in the, I would say, mediocre space, the reason why they're, I would say, like having trouble finding out who they want to be in their head is because they're busy in their phone. Either your phone's a tool or you're the tool. And what happens is they've become a tool to just junk. And what happens is that because that space in your head has gotten taken over, you don't even know who you are anymore.
Yeah.
Back in 2005, pretty close to when I first started at Facebook, maybe like this is week 2 or week 3, trying to figure out what to do. Nobody was really giving me much direction. And I remember Mark walking up to me and he's like, hey dude, I think you should write a search engine for Facebook.
Yeah,
and
just you.
Yeah. And
it's like you and what team,
yeah,
right?
and I
It's
was
like,
and he's like, it's really important because when people come onto Facebook, the first thing they want to do is search for people's. And then my first reaction was like, Mark, I don't know how to write a search engine. I've never done this. Why don't we go hire somebody from Google or Yahoo to do this? And he looked at me, he's like, dude, if I can build Facebook, you can build a damn search engine.
And you did.
And I did.
I mean, it's like,
I did.
There's like
And when I say it was the 30 seconds that I still think about, which is all of us can build whatever we put our minds to. Yeah. And this is kind of the culture that for me still defines Facebook, right? Which is that there's this hacker can do total ownership culture. That if I could actually tell every startup in the world to take one thing, which is that all of you can do whatever you want as long as you put your mind to it, it's probably easier than you think.
People ask a lot about the algorithms. Yeah. Feel like it's a black box. Everyone always feels like they deserve more reach than they get, and sometimes it's the case. But one of the most important things to look at if you're trying to evaluate how your videos or anything is doing on Instagram is definitely the sends. Sends, I would look at sends per reach. So of the people who saw it, how many of them sent it to a friend? Because that tends to be the content that does the best because it tends to drive the most value for the overall community. You see something that you think, what's one of your interests?
Lately, I've been getting into gardening and planting food in my backyard. So.
All right. My best friend has a huge green thumb. So we're going to use him in this example instead.
Okay.
If you saw some amazing basil planting video, maybe some sort of time lapse, right? And you sent that to my buddy Hondro. That is an interesting moment because you discovered something. Someone made something creative, something beautiful, something interesting. And then you shared it with a friend. In this hypothetical world, you and Hondro are also buds.
Of course.
And then he's psyched to get it. And that you might actually have a conversation about gardening, basil, whatever you like. But then he came back to Instagram. And then he actually probably checked out some more things. And then maybe he saw an amazing, soccer highlight. And then he sent that to me. And that's the flywheel, where yes, you are discovering something. It's consumption. It's somewhat passive to see a video. But then you send it to a friend, you start a conversation. Then that helps them discover more things themselves. And they send it to someone else. And that starts another conversation. And that's why short form video for us is so symbiotic with connecting people with their friends.